There's a photo I hadn't seen until recently. Black and white, slightly curled at the edges. A dog stretched out in the grass like he owned the place, which, knowing my family, he probably did. I recognized that boxer immediately. I'd heard stories about him all my life. And there it was, in blue ink across the bottom. Colonel, 1960. It was seeing that photo that shattered one of my long-held childhood beliefs. But we'll come back to him. The dog, I mean. First, we need to talk about how Clarence, my grandfather, once traded his way into an airplane. And then, possibly his karmic balance ended up with a crate full of chickens and a wife who was not amused. Welcome back to Museum of the Ancestors, where I build miniature spaces for the people who built me. This one's for my grandfather Clarence. If you've been following along, you already know he was clever, charming, and had a streak of chaos that he passed down like eye color. He could out-talk most men, out-drive nearly anything, and occasionally outsmart himself in spectacular fashion. I never met him. Clarence died when my father was just 19, so I don't have memories, just stories, the kind that get polished and passed around at family gatherings until they're 60% true and 100% legend. This episode is a lighter one. The last story we told together was about loss. This time, it's about gain. Trade deals, airplanes, chickens, and a dog with a surprising name. And while I tell you about Clarence's more questionable business decisions, I'll be gluing walls, staining wood, and building tiny trusses for the next phase of Clarence's shed. So while I'm telling you about Clarence's more questionable barter decisions, I'm picking through my paints, looking for the right shade to stain these square dowels. These are the pieces that will join all three walls together, and even though they're not flashy, they're the bones of the build. Clarence would have liked that, solid, structural, a little rough around the edges. He was a man who believed in reinforcement. If something wobbled, it just needed more nails, or baling wire, or in at least one case, an entire door from a different house. I'm not going that far here. Just a wash of color to take the newness off and help it feel like it belongs. I think that's what all this miniature building is really about, trying to make things feel like they belong. Clarence had a gift for that. He belonged in places not because they were neat or organized, but because he left a mark in every room, a story. Sometimes several stories, and inevitably something that made perfect sense to him and baffled everyone else. So while this little shed takes shape, let me tell you one of my favorite stories about him. It starts, as these things often do, with something that seemed like a good idea at the time. So here's what I know. Clarence and a couple of his buddies decided it would be a lark to own an airplane. Not for anything useful like crop dusting or delivering mail. No, they just wanted to be able to hop over to Indianapolis or Dayton or Fort Wayne. I'm not here to question their choices, but I will say, no one has ever described Dayton, Ohio as a thrill-seeker's paradise. Still, Clarence was not a man to let geography or a complete lack of funds stand in his way. He didn't have money. That was a technicality. What he did have was a network of men with barns full of perfectly good stuff and a highly flexible definition of value. One of them had an outboard motor they hadn't used in years. Another had a table saw with a temperamental motor. Clarence had the transmission of a 1941 Plymouth and the persuasive ability of a mid-century pirate radio host. And by some combination of trades, IOUs, and interpersonal alchemy, they got their plane. And here's the part that still makes me laugh. They flew it. I mean, they actually flew the thing. When my grandmother moved south and we were closing up her house, I walked into my dad's office and found him flipping through Clarence's flight logs. Page after page, written in my grandfather's hand, coordinates, altitudes, weather notes, and destinations. Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Dayton, Knoxville, Tennessee. They flew to visit Auntie, his sister who raised him after his mother died. And it shocked the heck out of her. Imagine looking out your kitchen window and seeing your little brother land a plane in the field like it was the most natural thing in the world. Clarence wasn't rich. He wasn't especially practical, but if he set his mind to something, well, sometimes it flew. Before assembling the walls, I'm mixing joint compound with brown paint and working it into the seams between the boards. It's a small trick that makes a big difference. One of those quiet, satisfying steps that doesn't look like much but changes everything. The compound settles into the gaps, softens the joins, weathers that perfection. It makes it look like something that's existed through time, something real. Some of these boards didn't sit flush. The cuts weren't all perfect. That's fine. Neither was Clarence. You patch what needs patching, you work a little history into the cracks. You pretend like it was always meant to go together this way. And somehow, you end up with something solid. That plane? God only knows what they bartered to get it or how they convinced someone to part with something that could actually fly. But it did. It flew. And it carried him across the Midwest and down to Knoxville, right into Auntie's wide-eyed kitchen window view. It wasn't about the destination. I don't think it ever was. It was about proving that the impossible thing could be done. And once you've flown a plane you didn't pay for, well, the next logical step is obviously a crate of chickens. Ah, yes. Who can forget the great chicken swap of 1960? So here's how the story goes. At some point, not long after the airplane and possibly while the adrenaline was still wearing off, Clarence decided to make another trade. I don't know what he started with. It could have been broken farm equipment. It could have been a handshake and a winning smile. But what he came home with was a crate of live chickens. No coop, no plan, no explanation. Just a man in work boots and an ancient truck pulling into the driveway like this was a perfectly reasonable Tuesday decision. My grandmother, Mildred, opened the back door, looked at the crate, looked at Clarence, and turned right back around and closed the door without saying a word. They did not live on a farm. They lived on an acre of city soil in Muncie, Indiana, green and good, but definitely not zoned for livestock. Clarence set the crate in the backyard like he had just brought home gardening supplies and announced that fresh eggs were just the beginning. What followed was pure chaos. One chicken made a break for the street, requiring a chase scene involving all three children, a neighbor and curlers, and a passing milkman. And then, once the feathered fugitive was finally caught, another, who was apparently named Agnes, tried to roost in the engine compartment of a Buick. It was, by all accounts, bedlam. But Clarence? He never flinched. He said it was an opportunity in progress. That was Clarence's phrase for every plan that was spiraling out of control but hadn't yet caught fire. Mildred gave the chickens 3 days. On day 4, Clarence made another trade. The chickens went off to some new adventure, hopefully one with proper fencing, and in their place came a different crate. Inside, a boxer. Beautiful, broad-chested, calm, with the patience of a man who's seen too much. Clarence opened the crate and the dog stepped out like he already lived there, sat on the porch and surveyed his new domain like, yes, this will do. And that's how Colonel came to stay. Colonel. You know, for most of my life, I thought his name was spelled C-O-L-O-N-E-L. Colonel, like a commanding officer. I imagined him as the unbothered commander of the household, watching over the yard, keeping the neighborhood squirrels in check, issuing silent orders with a side eye and a slow sigh. Clarence might have been the one doing the building and the bartering, but Colonel kept the perimeter secure. And then, just a couple of months ago, I found the photo. It's the kind of picture that lives in a box for years, creases at the corners, sun faded, but still holding a moment. and written at the bottom in blue ink, clear as day, Colonel, 1960. Not Colonel, Colonel, Kurnel. I stared at it. I think I literally said, "What?" Because here's the thing. Clarence was an excellent speller with beautiful copperplate handwriting and a full command of punctuation. So where on earth did Colonel come from? Was it a joke? A quirk? Some regional spelling from a friend of a friend of a friend that he traded the dog from? I have no idea. And now, there's no one left to ask. That's the thing about stories. If you don't tell them, if you don't pass them around like mason jars and wrenches and worn-out tools, they slip into the ether. They blur. They get misremembered, or worse, they get lost entirely. I think about that a lot when I'm building these little walls and staining these tiny beams. Every time I tell a story, I feel like I'm shoring up something real. Even if the details get a little fuzzy, even if the spelling gets a little unconventional. My mom and I were talking the other day about this shed, about Clarence, and how I'm spending my evenings squinting at tiny little beams and gluing them together with bad posture but good intentions. And she goes, "You know it wasn't much of a shed, right? You're making it look too good." Which, first of all, thank you, I guess. And second, I had to explain to her, for the 7th millionth time, that this isn't about replicating a specific floor plan. It's not historic preservation. It's not even memory, really. It's imagination. This is the shed I wish he'd had, the one he deserved, the one with strong walls and a hardwood floor and a place for every rusty tool and tall tale. Because Clarence and Mildred and everyone else I'm building for, they didn't get memorials, no statues, no plaques, no carefully curated museum exhibits. What they left behind was stories, some faded, some exaggerated, some hanging on by a thread. And these little rooms I'm building, this is my way of holding space for them. Not the space they had, the space they earned. So now that the stain is dry, it's time to glue the corner posts onto the front wall. These are the vertical supports that join everything together. Quiet little reinforcements that nobody really notices once the shed is finished. But if they're even a hair off, the whole thing starts to lean, like it's been sipping bourbon in the sun. Which is why I should measure. But here's the truth, I don't really like math. I mean, I respect it. I admire people who can do it. But I personally prefer to measure by vibe. Eyeball it, fiddle with it, squeeze it into place, and hope for the best. Clarence would have understood. This is the man who once used a butter knife as a shim and called it good enough, and it lasted a decade. So I lined the posts up against the front wall, squint a little, adjust for daylight and mood, and press them into place with glue. And while those dry, I start building the roof trusses. I cut 3 triangles to support the pitch, one for each end and one in the middle. This is where the math really should happen. Angles, symmetry, trigonometry maybe. But again, I'm more of a draw it with a pencil and cut it until it fits kind of builder. I sketch out the triangle on a piece of paper, lay my wood strips over the lines, and glue them where they meet. Is it precise? No. Is it going to work? Probably. Is it going to look good once the roof is on? Absolutely. And that's the magic of miniatures. If the bones are strong and the heart is in it, the rest will follow. Probably. Here's where we stand. Clarence's shed is beginning to take shape. The walls are nearly complete. Support beams stained. Seams filled. Corner posts attached. Trusses trussed. We talked about chickens and airplanes and a boxer named Colonel. We're not quite standing in a finished space yet, but we're getting closer. In the next video, I'll be gluing 3 walls together and setting them in place on a 2x2 square of XPS foam. That will be the foundation. Once they're standing, I'll draw out the dimensions of the hardwood floor that will live inside the shed. Just a little rectangle of brown stained craft sticks, but it's going to be fabulous. Then I'll glue the wall structure to the board, and the trusses will get glued on top. Solid bones for a roof that I haven't yet fully imagined, and the stories will keep stacking up like lumber in a corner. There's more to build, more to tell. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you, truly. Whether this is your first time watching or you've been here since the beginning, I'm grateful you're along for the ride. These stories about Clarence, about Mildred, and about the people who shaped me, they matter. And knowing that there are kindred spirits who are watching, listening, and remembering your own people, it means more than I can say. If you enjoyed this one, I would love it if you'd like the video, leave a comment, or share it with someone who might get a kick out of a man who traded chickens for a dog. And if you've got your own family trading stories, barns full of perfectly good stuff, dogs with mysterious names, or an opinion about Dayton, Ohio, I would love to hear from you. Stories live longer when we tell them out loud. I'll be back soon to raise these walls and keep building this space for Clarence. Until then, take good care, and maybe think twice before trading your lawnmower for livestock.